Welcome to the Higher Love with Megan podcast with me, your host, Megan Cooper, a holistic coach and trauma-informed practitioner. This podcast seeks to break out of the echo chamber of societal narratives that perpetuate our institutions and challenge the status quo of wellness and beyond. Join me as we decolonize our minds, address and use our privilege, and prioritize inclusivity. Here, diverse experiences are honoured, and together we are fostering a space that stands for higher love for all. As a listener, you are not just here to passively consume. You're an ambassador for deep healing and societal evolutions, ready to engage in thought-provoking, challenging conversations. As your host, I'm committed to providing ever-expansive spaces that inspire us to contribute to a world defined by higher love. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Welcome, Viv. It's so good to have you this morning. Thank you so much for taking your time and energy out today to spend it with me and listeners. So welcome to the Higher Love with Megan podcast.
Thank you, Megan. Lovely to be with you.
So instead of me reading back guests' bios to themselves, I always love to just start with you in your own words, how you would like to introduce yourself today in whatever way that feels most alive for you today.
Oh, goodness, Megan. Where would I start in terms of introducing myself? I think I'd start off by saying my name. I'm Viv Grant. At the moment, as I shared with you at the start, Megan, I'm grieving the loss of my mother. So I am a woman who's in her late 50s now, of Jamaican descent. My mum was of the Windrush generation, and the person who's with you today on this podcast is someone who was shaped by that woman, what she meant to me in my life. And so here I am today with you. You know, it's easy, it's funny, isn't it? When someone asks you that question to introduce yourself, you can immediately go to labels and say, well, I'm this and I'm this and I'm this. But actually at the core, I would say, today, I am a daughter who's grieving the loss of her mum, and the labels that, do impact, I suppose, how I show up in the world, having been a former head teacher and now an executive coach of integrity coaching. But at the heart, I am the daughter of Venetia Elsada Grant, who passed away just before Christmas.
Thank you. Thank you for introducing yourself essentially as a human, going through the human stuff today. And just condolences again for the loss of your mum. I know that it's fresh, and I know that kind of what we're talking about today will be influenced by kind of where you're at, which I think is a beautiful thing, especially in life where, we have to wear so many of these masks all the time by the systems that are in place and the labels and the roles that we have to, carry each day. So I feel grateful for just being able to have a human conversation today. So your new book, Learning to Walk in the Dark. What is the essence of the book?
Well, the essence of the book, I would say, is a book for us human beings who go through difficult times. And we live in a world where actually those difficult times, those dark times, we're not necessarily encouraged how to travel through those night journeys. And, I wrote the book. I never intended to write it because I had a rare cancer diagnosis a couple of years ago. So essentially, really, it is for those who are traveling with cancer, those who have recovered from cancer. But it's not only for those individuals. It's for individuals, really. We're all human and we all go through difficult times. And so really, for me, my hope for the book is that it will help people who are going through difficult times to find a different way to navigate the dark. And I think what's come through for me with the book is understanding that as individuals, and I believe we all have a soul, that when we go through these dark times, if we are attuned and find ways to attune to our soul, we can help to navigate these dark times. Might not always be easy, but we find this inner compass that helps us to find a way forward.
And I love what you said just before we hit record. I always think I need to hit record right at the beginning, or, I find I had these wonderful nuggets for guests just before or after me. But there was something that you said where I said to you, I guess that when you wrote the book and where you are now, learning to walk in the dark means something different. But actually, I love what you said of it's not that it's different, it's just deeper layers of walking in the dark. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I can, Megan. So as I was saying earlier, when I wrote the book, Learning to Walk in the Dark, maybe I should just explain the process of how the book
please
together.
Do.
So I had this cancer diagnosis in August 2023. And it turned out to be a rare and aggressive type of cancer that's dominant in women of colour called uterine serous carcinoma. And as you can imagine, I felt as though my whole world had fell apart. You think, other people get cancer, but it's never going to be you.
Yeah.
But it was me. And in terms of having surgery and radiotherapy, one of the things that I was kind of clear about was I wanted a way to have agency over my recovery. And I was sitting at the Royal Marsden probably about a week before I had to have a hysterectomy, a week before surgery. And I saw that it said that they offered art therapy. So I thought, that'll be great. I'll get an art therapist. And I rang them about a week before surgery and they said, no, sorry, we haven't had an art therapist here for over 18 months. So I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I remember coming home and I said to my daughter, who at the time must have been 19 or 20, oh, I'm really upset. I thought I could do art therapy when I was recovering and now it looks like I won't be able to do it. And her best friend, Isha, was there at the time. And Isha is studying art. And jokingly, she said, oh, Viv, I'll be your art therapist. And I kind of dismissed it, really. But then about a week after surgery, and I could barely walk, Isha rang the doorbell. She came with acrylics and canvases.
Wow.
And her and my daughter, they put little fairy lights in the front room and everything. And they said, we're going to paint. And I was like, oh, but Isha, I don't know what to paint. I haven't painted since secondary school. I don't paint. And she just said to me, Viv, don't overthink it. And then, Megan, all I can say is it just felt like something was broken open inside of me. And I started to paint pictures. At the time, I didn't understand what they were about. They were mainly of trees and roots in the darkness, but they just kept flowing out of me. I had no comprehension. I'd wake up in the morning and it's like, I've got to paint. And so I just kept painting. So over a period of 3 weeks, I just kept painting and painting. And then after a while, I just thought, I need to somehow make sense of these paintings and what they're about. So I remember I went into my bedroom, I spread them all around me. Now I am a coach and I do talk a lot about taking care of the soul in the role. So I know, and you may as well, Megan, know about the archetype of the soul's journey, where we have these 3 distinct stages in life when we go through difficult times, where we're pulled away from what we know, we descend, and then we come out the other side. And I suddenly went, oh my God, they're depicting to me the soul's journey. This is where I'm at. Oh my goodness. I can see these 5 paintings are all to do with the descent. I can see these 5 are to do with when you're in the darkness and you just don't know what to do. And I can see that these 5 are to do with coming out the other side. And then the words just came and the words flowed. And suddenly I had this book that I didn't know was waiting to be born inside of me. And the book, as I said, you referred to our conversation earlier before you pressed record. In writing it and putting the pictures together, it helped me understand my journey through cancer. It helped me understand what was happening within me, particularly when I was really afraid at one point after surgery and we didn't know if the cancer had spread and we were waiting for the results. And I felt like there was a lot of fear around me, all of it coming from a good place, but you've got to do this, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. But I could tell it was all fear that was propelling people's advice and telling me what to do. And I thought, I just have to ground myself. Because if I listen to the fear, I know there's something deeper in this, even though I don't quite know yet. But I know if I listen to the fear and I allow fear to dictate my actions or the choices that I make around the cancer and my treatment, then actually I don't think the growth that I know is waiting to sort of come forth within me is going to happen. And so the book, in that respect, it really helped me initially with understanding that growth happens in the dark. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that the paintings, which I still paint now, which is lovely, and creativity has become a real part of who I am now, that really supported and helped me. And then with my mum passing, and I said to you about learning to walk in the dark, it has deepened my journey. It's just given me a greater empathy, sympathy, understanding to what I'm going through right now. I mean, I've never, ever experienced grief like this before in my whole entire life. But what I do know is, even though I do feel like I am in the belly of the well right now and in the dark, in the depths, that I know that things such as stillness, leaning into creativity, that they will help me in this place. And I know I can't rush to the other side. I know so much in our society, it's about when we face these dark times, let's keep ourselves busy. Let's do X, Y, and Z so we don't have to face the dark. But the book and what I've learned through traveling through cancer has really told me that the dark is okay, even though it's really tough and it's difficult. It's okay. We are cocooned. We are held by the dark.
Mm. I love that. And I was so fascinated by the artwork in the book. And, I have a question there. I find it really fascinating that the artwork was such a big part of became such a big part of your healing. What do you feel would have been missing in your recovery, in your healing, if the artwork hadn't have manifested?
So much though, Megan, because as I said to you, before you press record, I do believe this is part of my soul's journey. And I think what would have been missing, so another part of this story is just before I got a call telling me I had to go into the hospital for an emergency CT scan. That day, I finished a literature review. So I was partway through my PhD. Well, the literature review, and part of it was around wholeness. And I'd done an academic review of what wholeness means for school leadership. So wholeness, when we are broken apart by circumstance and life throws us into a place as leaders where we have to reassess who we are and we have to reassemble the broken pieces of ourselves so that we can reemerge in the world with new wisdom. Now, to me anyway, it was kind of like, okay, academically, you've got that. And then life came and said, okay, academically, but now you're going to have a real embodied experience of what wholeness means, of being broken open. And that's what happened. And so what would have been missed, I think, so, I said earlier to you about the fear that was swirling around. I think if I'd listened to the fear, I'd have done what most people would do. We rationalize ourselves out of these difficult times. So if I have a plan, if I'm in control, if I do X, Y, and Z, if I listen to the medics, if I listen to the people who know, then I'll be all right. And I think that's a real dominant narrative. I found that anyway. I understand to a certain extent why. But for me, I could feel this ache. That's the only way I can describe it. There was this ache. There was something inside of me that wanted to be expressed. And again, with my paintings, I can't even find the words to say. And I say this actually in the book. My paintings give expression to what words couldn't. One of my paintings literally told me that my soul was waiting to be born again. And that's what I feel would have been missed if I hadn't leaned into the creativity, if I hadn't leaned into the art. But again, what was really important, I had to still my mind. I had to stop the worrying or the anxiety or the rumination. And I had to find that place of stillness. And I really do believe this. It was when I was still, when I stopped the outside world trying to encroach on what was happening for me. I do believe that's when my soul broke open and I was able to listen at a much deeper level. In my work, I talk a lot about the inner work of school leadership, but it's the inner work for all of us. We all are called to do an inner work. But it needs silence and stillness for the wisdom that's within us to come forth. And that's what happened for me with the painting. And that would have been missed if I hadn't created that space and allowed that to, come through me.
And it's such a different way of approaching healing and leadership, actually leaning into stillness and leaning into wholeness. It's probably too early for you to answer in regards to the grief process with your mum, but in regards to the cancer diagnosis, what do you feel, or in what ways do you feel it was demanding you show up differently? What was it asking you to integrate? Maybe it's too early to with that.
Asking me to integrate. I think it was asking me to go on a deeper level with soul, actually. And by that, I mean, because, so much of my company's work, as I said earlier, is helping school leaders to take care of the soul in the role. And I think we do it really well. But I think what is being asked of me is through the book and through what I went through, this whole, and again, I knew it, but again, it's a deeper embodied knowing about the role of vulnerability and what vulnerability asks of us, again, when we go through these dark times, and a sense of actually my story And that has always been the case, I suppose. When I look back and I think, well, when I left headship, why did I get into coaching? It was all, there's this vulnerability thread. I have a major story about when I was a headship, when I was a head teacher in headship, how a key incident where I had to recognize my own vulnerability, which again was not a part of Viv Grant that I had integrated, but I had. And that led me on a journey to then training as a coach. And I think for me, with the cancer and with mum passing, it's this deeper walk with vulnerability, because part of my narrative is to be a strong Black woman or a strong woman of colour, because my mum was part of the Windrush generation. So we know the story of those who came from the Caribbean to help rebuild the UK. So my mum had to be strong. She had to survive. But if we know anything about the be strong driver, you're not very good at showing vulnerability. You're not very good at asking for help. You're not very good at showing weakness. So that has been a life journey for me. And with every dark night, it feels as though life is saying, Viv, you can be strong. You are strong. But you need to find a way to hold that strength that allows vulnerability at the same time. And it really does feel, with everything. So you say, talk about the integration. For me, it's a deepening of what strength means for me, how I hold it. So it becomes more about thriving and less to do with surviving.
There was something that was coming up for me of, again, I'm going to quote Gabor Mate. I swear he's my most quoted person. But I remember watching a lecture where he differentiated between being strong and being powerful. Because when you're strong, it is that, okay, buckle down, put on a brave face, put on the mask, let's go, warrior energy, which has served, especially for somebody like your mum and the generation that she was part of, what other choice was there? But then being powerful, you can be both strong and vulnerable and lean into the vulnerability and the shadows and stuff at the same time. And you can be powerful and weak at the same time, which I loved that differentiation. And I'm curious to ask, because, I know that, a part of your story was being one of the heads in the country to turn around a failing primary school. And, I understand a little bit more about your journey there and the praise that obviously you will be receiving. But there was also, it sounds like, the stuff going on beneath the surface, the mental load, the emotional load, and, the vulnerability that you touched on. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, because I look back and I was so young then. I was I think my early 30s, late 20s, early 30s. Who becomes a head at that age? Well, but now more people are, but then it was very unusual. And, I look back, obviously we would hope and we believe that with age, we become wise. And I am a very different person now. But I look back and I think, I became a head. And it's because I love the school and I love the community, and those that appointed me, yes, what they saw was really this young, courageous teacher, deputy head, let's appoint her as head teacher, even though at the time also I was 8.5 months pregnant with my first child, so.
Bloody hell.
I know. So really,
you really went all in, didn't you?
Really, really bonkers, but you don't have that wisdom. You have the energy of youth.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. And I think, it was when I look back now, with the knowledge that I have, there was also a frightened young girl inside. So what everyone saw was the persona, but also what was inside was the Viv Grant who was told at school that she'd never be anything. The Viv Grant who at school was told, actually, rather than even aspire to be a nursery nurse, aspire to be a cashier in the local supermarket. So I had all of that going on internally, and I was very good at showing up as being strong, not letting anyone know. And what I've come to realize through the work that we now do with school leaders, most school leaders will have a narrative that's behind the mask or the social persona. And that narrative, if not addressed, is what brings in the stress and the burnout, because that narrative, if it's of the younger child or the inner child who has not fully healed, then what that inner child does then is deploy the defense mechanisms that were deployed when they were younger to survive. But we don't recognize, no, life is calling you forward, a different trajectory now. But again, if we're not having the conversations to facilitate that with school leaders, then they're not aware. And therefore, the job becomes harder. So that's what I had to learn as a young head teacher, that there's inner work, always, always, always inner work that needs to be attended to, enable for everyone to show up as their best self.
What was that turning point for you from being a head teacher? What did that look like?
Okay, so I told you, it feels like for me, part of my life's journey is around this thing between vulnerability and strength. And I like what you said, the rephrasing around being powerful. So what happened was, my son must have been about 5.5 months, and he was with my mum. So my mum was looking after him, and it was the end of a school day. And my mum had rung me to say, Isaac is ill. I think you should come and pick him up. But young Viv believes she can soldier on. Young Viv believes, hey, it's fine. He's with grandma. Yeah, I may have a really bad headache. Yes, I have been at school since 6 o'clock, but hey, that's the life of a head teacher. That doesn't matter. But what I planned to do that evening was to do a home visit. So my school was on the edge of an estate in Stockwell, South London. And this child, we all loved this child. He was year 5. I'm going to give him a pseudonym. Let's just call him Frank. And Frank had come to us. He'd been expelled from a number of other schools. But because he lived very near to us and we really believed in inclusion, we were going to do all we could to help Frank be the best that he could be. And he was beautiful. We could see that this child, could really soar, but he also had real kind of anger issues. So there'd be times when he would just explode. But it soon became really apparent why, because a number of our support staff at the school, they lived on the same estate. So when I would drive into school in the mornings, they would say to me, Miss Grant, we've seen Frank again out on the estate, 11 o'clock at night. Or we've seen Frank in the pouring rain, bringing back the bags of shopping for the whole family. Or we've seen just all sorts. And I knew that if I didn't get his mother involved in the secondary transfer process, he would not get a chance of going to a good school. She would just go for any school. So I was going to do a home visit. So I bear in mind, I've been in school since about 6:30 in the morning, and that's normal for head teachers still today. I've done a full day. I'm a young mother. I'm still learning what it means to be a mum. My mum's told me my child is ill, come home, but I'm like, no. So the family were from the French Caribbean. And so I asked a member of staff because I don't speak French, to come across to the flats with me. And she did. And as soon as we stepped into the flats, the mother started swearing at me in a mixture of broken French and broken English. And then something just changed. And my colleague says, I'm still friends with her to this day, said, Viv, a look came across your face that I'd never seen before. Normally, Viv, you were very together. You can hold yourself together. You would know how to respond to a parent's anger. But it was almost as if a shadow, a sheet dropped across your face. And it's almost as if you were going to collapse. So she intervened. Because basically what this mother was saying to me, who are you to be telling me how to bring up my son? Everyone sees the time that you get in. Everyone sees the time that you leave. We all know you've had a baby. So what are you doing? So literally, we made our excuses. We got to my car and I burst into tears. And that was one of my really first experience. I didn't realize at the time, but this was vulnerability come knocking at the door. Yeah. Okay, Viv. Miss Strong, you think you can do it all? All these tears you've been bottling up inside, and you haven't told anyone how you are really feeling about the job and how this job is getting to you. And you have a baby. Okay, Viv, maybe now is the time to acknowledge what you're really feeling. And what happened was, I remember going into school the next day. I didn't know who to talk to because, again, coaching wasn't a thing in those days. And I was really scared. I thought, who can I talk to? They've just appointed me. They're going to think I'm weak. But I'm like, I know I love this school. I know I can do it. So after going round and round in my head as to who I should talk to, I eventually decided I'd talk to the school counsellor, because we had a school counsellor who was there for the most vulnerable children. And I just thought, I'm going to go and talk to her. And that was really what started me on the journey. To this day, I don't know if she knows how important she was for me, because she just gave me that space and she taught me how important it is for people just to be listened to. She never gave me advice, never told me what to do, allowed me to cry and never saw crying as a sign of weakness. Like, Viv, that's good. It's good, Viv. Let it all out. It's okay. It's okay, Viv.
Yeah.
And that's really what started me on this journey towards actually we need to support head teachers in a different way. We're not recognizing their humanity. We're not recognizing what is being asked of them when they step into the role.
Just based on your own story and your own experience, what did that illuminate to you that some of the biggest challenges are facing school leaders today?
I think so much, Megan. I think one, and I say this a lot, I think there's an immaturity in our education system around what good school leadership looks like. I think we still have a culture where a school is judged good simply by the standards and outcomes. No one ever asks at what cost. So if a school leader is seen to get in really early and work endless hours, we still don't fully understand that a person has to grow into a role, and we don't understand what growth means. We think growth means growing your school, particularly in the culture, the landscape that we have right now, where we have few standalone schools. We have more and more schools coming together into academy groups. So head teachers are losing some sense of autonomy and what it means leading from that place with your own school. So I really think there's a lack of understanding about personal and human growth. And that is key because my sense tends to be that what happens is head teachers are appointed and we forget that they're just at one stage in terms of their human development and growth, and headship calls so much of an individual. I often laugh with my head teachers and when we're having our one-to-one coaching sessions or when they just started, and I say, oh, and it's not what it's on the job description, is it? You're not here to discuss what's on your JD, what they say about school leadership. Again, it goes back to the inner work. What you are learning about yourself, whether it's a challenging member of staff, whether it's an awful incident that's happened maybe with a child or a safeguarding issue, whatever it might be, it's never what is on the surface. That is never the real issue. And again, the education system does not understand that. It works at a surface level. And because we have this high accountability culture and this real sort of public scrutiny, heads, and it's understandable, heads are searching, well, where can I show my vulnerable self? Because it's the vulnerable self that needs to be attended to. And by vulnerable, I don't mean weak. By vulnerable, I mean the true, authentic self. That is what I need to go on a journey with and explore so that I can move in and out of being external facing, but also be inward facing as well. And I just think education has a long way to go in terms of understanding that, what's needed for school leaders.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, I'm really interested in how our systems, our healthcare, prison systems, our policing, school systems perpetuate cycles of harm and perpetuate trauma. And, like you vocalize within your own education, you were told along the lines of you'll never amount to anything. I mean, a deeply traumatic story for a child to be receiving every single day about themselves and their self-identity. But when I looked at your company in integrity coaching, I was like, of course, it's not just what happens to children in school, it's what happens to teachers and to school teachers and to everybody within that system as well. Of course, it was one of those like big moments that it's, for me as a functional, like to think fairly functional adult, I always just think about how it affects kids, but of course, how it affects the whole system as well.
Right. Yeah. Most definitely. I think we forget that we're all interconnected. I truly believe that we're all connected. And I think what happens though, in terms of what happens systemically, it's those who are in power who want to maintain a particular status quo. And it's what damages, but also equally because of the norms around that in terms of maintaining a status quo, it actually, my experience is those for whom the status quo impacts the most detrimentally are often the ones who are blind to the way in which they're being used by the system to uphold, whether we call it oppression, trauma, or whatever. And for me, again, in education, that's so, for our work with school leaders, it's about enabling them to see that they can play a different role.
In regards to the different role that you feel that they can play, what is your vision for school leaders?
My vision for school leaders, what would I say? I think my vision is that we have, I would say, a healthy and humane school system. And by that, what I mean is school leaders who are able to lead from a place of true wisdom and courage. And again, I don't want those just to be like sound bites. For me, it's about they are there for the future generation. So we have to remember, but the children in our schools today are going to be the leaders of the world tomorrow. And if we look at where our world is today, oh my goodness, our current school leaders, they need to have wisdom, insight, and courage in abundance. And therefore, again, I know I keep repeating it, but I feel it's so key. The inner work is necessary. You do not cultivate wisdom, courage, and insight by just living life, doing school leadership on the surface. If we do that, it breaks my heart. We will not be empowering future generations of school leaders. So that is my vision, that we can cultivate, we can have a nation of school leaders who lead from the heart, who lead knowing that the inner work is foundational. It is necessary so that you can show up and be the leaders that our young people need them to be.
Bit of a gap between that and where we're at.
Yes,
How does integrity coaching seek to plug that gap? What does that work look like?
It looks like that through depth coaching, basically. So again, coaching is a big word. It actually has more traction now than it ever did when I was a head teacher. But I think the way in which we seek to plug the gap is through what we would call depth coaching. So again, it's that ability, your listeners are able to see this, but what I think about is how school leaders are asked to stand in the tragic gap. So I'm drawing with my finger.
You have listeners. Yes. It's drawing a you.
If you think of a school leader, at the top of the loop, on the one hand, you're expected to hold that sense of opportunity and hope and what can be drawn in, your vision. But you also have, on the other hand, the reality, what you were referring to, Megan, the reality of where we are now. And also all the cynics around that. So here you stand in this tragic gap of, do you get lost in the cynicism? Do you get caught up in the hope without being grounded in the belly of the well, within this liminal space? And what we at Integrity Coaching do is enable school leaders to stand in that space, because that, to be honest, that is where the world is standing right now. And again, we need leaders who have the wisdom and insight so you can reflect on your inner story. You can reflect on the degree to which your values are going deep into the depths of who you really are and how you show up. So for us, the distinction really is depth coaching, a way of being and a way of conversing with self that allows people to go to navigate the dark, because this is what these times are about. We have to be able, I say, to write new stories for ourselves. And again, we're not good at that. And again, the soul speaks in story. It speaks in metaphor. We need to have ways to engage at that level. So that's how integrity does that. We take them on a deeper journey through really is engagement with the soul.
I love how you've just described that, of really having kind of one foot in both camp of the cynicism that can often come up, which I definitely land into at times.
We all do. None of us are perfect, Megan. We all do.
Yeah, everything's burning. Help. Having one foot in that camp and one foot in, the hope and the vision, the vision that you've just outlined for school leaders. It's like, wow, I listen to that and feel into that. And I'm like, wow, what a different world we'd live in. And being able to have one foot in both camp and then find a way to kind of marry the two. And I really see that within, the wellness industry as well. I see these kind of, I'm a recovering love and lighter, where it's all a kind of slightly toxic positivity kind of camp. And then, I think that there's such a capacity, within the wellness industry as well, to be able to have one foot in both camps and to be able to then, create powerful change from that place, and that's what I hear coming through there, within, even within my podcast, the essence is around challenging the status quo and marrying up wellness and social justice and how we create change from there, because it's all interrelated as well. How do we get people to bring all of their wealth of knowledge and experience
Yes.
to actually moving things forward for society and humanity.
That's right. I couldn't agree more, Megan, because I really think another thing that we say, you know, when we look at our work that we do with school leaders, and, you know, that link you made to social justice, and for us, race equality is so important with our work. But we have to look at, I say, it being in right relationship with ourselves, right relationship with others, right relationship with society. But it starts with self. You know, it comes back to what we were saying earlier about brokenness and wholeness. If we can't face our shadows, if we're not prepared to go on that difficult journey of integration, then actually the wounds that we see in society, they will be perpetuated, because really the wounds and the way society is right now is because the wounds that people have within themselves that they haven't sought to heal, therefore they are projected outwards.
I'd love to ask you just about your racial literacy coaching. You know, I read an article where you were talking about good, grounded, confident, anti-racist leadership. What does that look like to you within integrity coaching?
What does that look like to me? I can speak for ages on this.
Yeah. You got 10 minutes.
I think what I would say, first of all, so when we talk about anti-racism, we're very good at talking about what we are against, and quite rightly so, against any forms of oppression in our society. However, and I should say, we also need to be really clear about what are we for. When we talk about what we are for, I think we enable a more grounded, confident leadership. Because then, you know, when we're with our school leaders and we encourage them to think about, well, what are you for? Oh, yes. We're for everyone showing up in the fullness of themselves. I mean, and again, the language that we use as well. So we deliberately use words like soul work, the fullness of yourself, your true self. What does that mean? Because then you invite in a different type of conversation. So it's, yes, we are against against racism, but we are for us as human beings living in the fullness of ourselves. And we do a lot of work around story, because again, we approach this work, because I think a lot of what I say and a lot of what the company says around race work, and if we think of within school, there are particular norms around race work. And so some of those norms are, well, why, you know, you have an action plan. So if you have an action plan and you do X policy and X policy and you tick it off, you're anti-racist. Now, if that were true, the world would not be the way it is today.
Yeah.
We would not see the rise in populism that we are seeing right now. So we have to ask ourselves, well, what is it that needs to be different? So it won't surprise you, Megan. We come back and we say the inner work. You have to ask, who am I? Before you go to policy and practice, ask, who am I? And when I say that, I'm talking about our leaders and teachers that we work with. And then ask, who are we? Because schools, you know, very much, and it saddens me today, but I think the stats say that over, I think it's between 85, maybe 90% of our school workforce, particularly at leadership, racialized as white. So we have to look at the question then, who am I? Who are we? Then we go to the outer circle. What is ours to do? But what we've traditionally done in the UK is we only go to what is ours to do, policy and practice. So I say that's leadership from the head upwards, and it's a norm. So if we do that, then we think we're improving our schools. We're not. It's to a degree. We have to do the inner work. Who am I and who are we? So we do story. We look at race socialization stories. And I cannot tell you, I've just finished with a group of senior executives for a local authority yesterday. And we were reflecting on the work they'd done. And I said, Viv, when we did that work, because when we share our race socialization stories, we identify the narrative arc that has been running through our lives around race. And we have a particular frame that we use to do it. We identify with each particular frame, what were the feelings? How was society impacting in terms of how we came to know ourselves as racialized identities? Because we all are racialized by this society. But when you have a story framework, which again is very different because it allows for metaphor. It allows for going deeper at soul level. I cannot tell you, Megan, you sense the change in the room. You have peers who have worked at they think that's what they said. They said, Viv, we thought we knew each other. We worked for years as a team. And then I say, well, what's changed? I said, we've never had conversations at this level before.
Wow.
You've invited us to be vulnerable in a way in which we never would have done before. But doing so in the context of our bigger why, because I get them to think about, so what's your why? What are you for? They make different connections with the work that go in deeper. And it's transformational. It's transformational. And again, it comes back to, I suppose, what I'm about, what integrity is about, this commitment to the inner work. Commit to the inner work. Magic happens. It's easy, but commit to it. Commit to that journey, and it allows for transformation. It's beautiful. And I feel blessed that, you can see I'm smiling now because, what I have in my head are the many school leaders, local authority leaders that we've taken on this journey, and to see the transformation. Yeah, it's wonderful. You can't put a price on that.
Amazing. We've just got time for one more question. So I'd love to ask many more questions. Been amazing, but I will just wrap up with a question that just popped into my head of learning to walk in the dark. What are you for?
Learning to walk in the dark. What am I for? I, Viv Grant, am for all of us as human beings, knowing that we are connected. And if we learn to walk in the dark, how we can form deeper connections, not only with ourselves, but with one another, the society and the planet. I think if we can just follow the thread and allow ourselves to guide us, then we'll realize that we can be for one another. And that's one of the most important things, I think, for ourselves and for one another.
Viv's vision. It's like, yes, I'm here for this. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. When is your book, Learning to Walk in the Dark, for anyone that's been inspired by this conversation? When is that out? Where can we find it?
Right. It comes out on World Cancer Day. So that's Tuesday, the 4th of February. And as they say, in all good bookshops and on Amazon, that's where you should be. Yeah.
Amazing. And how else can people get in touch with you, Viv?
Right. You can contact us on our website, www.coaching.co.uk, on LinkedIn, very easy, Viv Grant. We are on Blue Sky, I think, at Integrity Coaching. Yeah, they're the main ones. Oh, and Instagram as well. Yeah, you can find us as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a beautiful conversation. So very grateful for you sharing your time and energy with us today. Thank you, Viv.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it, Megan. Thanks.
Thank you for listening. It's great to have you with me on this journey towards higher love for all. Our time is our greatest commodity and gift, so thanks for investing it in yourself and sharing it with me. Please do take a moment to rate and review the show, all of which enables more people to find me and for me to connect with more great guests each week for both yours and my enjoyment. All links, references and contact information is detailed too within the show notes. And I always love to hear your feedback, so feel free to hit me up on my Instagram at higherlove_with_Megan or via my website higher-love.com. Send your takeaways, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share or send on to someone else who would benefit. Until next time, big love.